There are 10 rules of Dasharo. Like those are at early stage, but I believe those are key characteristics of just Dasharo. First of all, every Dasharo firmware which was produced as a result of Dasharo ecosystem pipeline has a binary release which has associated SHA-256 hash, which is needed for integrity verification, and then that hash is signed by specific set of cryptographic keys, which means first of all we know that this binary with that integrity check coming from that vendor or from that person. Of course, there may be complex key hierarchies that sign that, but this is other story. We may combine various key hierarchies for various vendors. General key hierarchy is as follow. So me as a 3MDEP vendor, maybe in future this may change, but right now it is as it is. So I'm signing the 3MDEP master key, then 3MDEP master key signing the open source firmware key, and then 3MDEP open source firmware key signing like a, I don't know, PC Engine's open source firmware release for given Dasharo release. And of course, like vendor and Dasharo release have to be substituted for given vendor and given version. We're rotating the keys with the versions, not with every minor version, but with every major version. Every release of firmware produced by our ecosystem has attached test report, so you know what's the quality of given release. Test specifications are publicly available on Dasharo website. There is generic Dasharo validation procedures which are described there, and there are segment-specific Dasharo validation procedures. So what I mean segment specifically? If we're saying about Dasharo firewall, this is a segment. Firewall is a market segment of computing device. And we know that firewalls typically work with pfSense, OpenSense, OpenWRT operating systems. And we simply validate those, we show how we validate those, and we show the results of those that validation. For servers, it would be different, like because we have, for example, Windows Server or Ubuntu Server, which have to install on this machine without problems. And that's what we validate, and what features of the system we validate. There also may be customer-specific Dasharo validation procedures, which are delivered as a separate PDF with the release. There is also on the website we typically have division by market segment. So every firmware produced by Dasharo ecosystem have dedicated market segment, and inside this market segment we have some platform which is called reference platform. Reference platform is the platform which was first enabled in this segment, and then when segment further expands, we just adding new platforms to hardware compatibility list. So we know that this given segment support this kind of devices, these vendors. Further, we use semantic versioning to indicate the version. We use keep a changelog 1.0 to explain what kind of changes were introduced in every release of the Dasharo firmware. Then we have Dasharo firmware releases which contain documentation how to verify integrity and how to verify signatures, so you personally can make sure that all this firmware coming from us, and this is the firmware that we want you to install. This is the firmware that we explain. And finally, we also explain like a software bill of material, every component with the links, if possible, if open links, if publicly available, and of course links to code changes and range of changes that were introduced in given Dasharo release.